And so when I talk about manipulation, it's certainly happening at the LMBA level. And we've seen numerous lawsuits where they get fined for, JP Morgan, $1 billion fine for spoofing the markets. But, that's nothing in terms of the amount of wealth that they've created over the decades by being the supreme currency. Well, I think when and if there's a new global monetary system, which I believe will have some gold backing, and I can walk you through how those numbers would work, and you get that Moscow gold standard in place, so that you take away the trading power from the West and it moves east to Russia and China where it already exists, then I think the lid will come off the gold price. One, you would hold it because it is a store of value. And if you watch the markets and the bond market, these equity markets, the crypto world come crashing down, gold's done okay. I mean, sure, it hasn't gone up, but it's done its job. It's maintained its store of value. But then as additional insurance, if I'm right, and I think the signs are everywhere that we're heading towards a different monetary system, bifurcated or multiple currencies, then you want to own something that's going to have to be revalued. And I can walk you through the numbers, how that revaluation would work. I think you're seeing the beginnings of it. There's no doubt in my mind we're heading towards a reset. I just don't know what it looks like at the end of the day. I just watch all of the indicators, like the accumulation of gold. And you think about it, since 2010, all the central banks around the world have been buying gold, right? Every year, they come, all of the non-Western countries.
Right.
Brazil was late to the game. In 2020, they came in 2021 and they doubled their reserves in just 1 year. They went from 60 tons to 120 tons. So I think everybody is preparing, setting the stage. View it as a piece of a bigger puzzle. It's an important piece, but to me, it's a lesser important piece than what is happening in terms of all of these conversations by the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, or the BRICS, China, Russia, the rest of the world, clamoring for something different. Okay, so it's just one piece of a mosaic that I see kind of unfolding in front of my eyes. I think you have to separate what the U.S. really wants is to be ahead of the game on blockchain, not Bitcoin in particular, or some form of digital system that they can eventually take over, and that's, they're going to create their own central bank digital currency like everybody else in the world, and they're not going to want competition. I see Bitcoin as an anti-sovereign fiat play. And if I'm right about a monetary reset where everybody's going to something else that incorporates digital currencies in that whatever they create, the last thing they're going to want is the competition from Bitcoin. And as I said a year and a half ago during our debate with Michael Saylor, eventually they will want to take Bitcoin out. I think there's too much risk there. The only thing that I can think of, and again, I don't have a crystal ball, okay, here, I'm just speculating, but the only thing I can think of is have some physical gold, okay? I think everybody, and I mean everybody, should own some physical gold. That means, according to your wealth, okay, in relationship to your wealth. Even if you own one coin, it's $1,700 a coin. Recently I saw that there was a discovery in the UK. They unburied, they were building a house and they found a pot of gold that was 250 years old. Today's gold has the same purchasing power as that gold had back then. It's all relative. And in the meantime, paper currencies have come and gone, been destroyed, been inflated away. Own some gold is all I can say. I don't have any other answer because they can't attack your coin of gold. They can certainly, if they wanted to, attack anything that's out there in the digital world.
Grow up in zero privacy. I mean, does this keep you up at night?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think we're heading to a 1984 Orwellian world. I really do. I'm not sure what one can do to stop it if everybody does it. America's going to do it. China's done it already. I don't know what world we're going into, but I don't like it.
Do you talk about it with your kids?
Not in detail, but certainly, I'm the chairman of an organization that is trying to prevent conflict around the world. And so I know a lot about the geopolitical conflicts, and I've studied history, and I see patterns that emerge over and over again. And I tell my children that we're going through a change and that they have to be prepared to see some difficult times ahead, and I coach them, where they should live, and obviously they're going to do what they're going to do.
Where should we live? I want to know. Tell me. Here.
Canada. Right.
Oh, I'm going to stay right here. You're not getting rid of me.
The weather's nicer here.
Yeah.
I think it's only fair from the point of view that they've done a lousy job of marketing up until now. And what they've just, the World Gold Council just announced a couple of weeks ago that they're creating, and I know it's been in the works for about a year now, a token backed by gold, a digital token backed by gold that's accessible, easy accessible, like Bitcoin is. It's fungible, and it's basically modernizing the way that people can invest in gold. So that's a really great improvement from having done not a great marketing job in the past. But I think to answer the question directly about gold mining companies, I know that about 20-something years ago, a gold mining company in Canada tried that. They said, well, we're not going to, we're gold. The founder, Rob McEwen, was a gold bug, and he really believed in gold. He said, no, we're going to keep our gold, and we're not going to sell it for dollars, whatever. The problem is you're a publicly traded company that's trying to attract institutional investors, and the institutional investors didn't like that idea. They wanted to see earnings. They wanted to be able to project cash flows so they could do their multiples. So as great as his motivation was, and in a way he was right, because he's saying this when gold was $250, $300 an ounce, he would have lost a lot of, it's just not the world of public companies trade in.
And, obviously if we look at the price, you look at the price of Bitcoin now. When we did the debate, we were around the 60,000. We're now around the 20,000 mark. You're just smiling.
Well, God, again, and I've said this so many times, it didn't take a PhD in math to be able to see that Bitcoin was perfectly correlated with speculation stocks, the NASDAQ, all this crazy stuff, and it was a bubble. Anybody could see it was a bubble. Any person who had been around long enough to see it was a bubble.
I know what was fueling you, what was angering you, is the talk of, mortgage your house, sell everything.
It was the worst advice, and there were several players out there, not just Michael Saylor, but others that were saying sell everything, put everything to Bitcoin, and I thought that was the most irresponsible and stupid thing that people could say. And I that's the reason I asked you for the debate. I was angry that he was getting away with it.
I know we're going to take a walk amongst these beautiful grounds of yours, but I need to get your thoughts a little bit, on the Fed. I know you've been very, very critical. You've come out saying you feel the inflation numbers are actually much higher. They're actually suppressing the inflation numbers they're giving us. Yeah. Just thoughts on where you think they're headed. How much longer can they tighten for?
I think the pivot is around the corner.
Really?
I've said all along, I said it in 2009, and I said it for the last 15 or so years, they cannot raise rates. It's mathematically impossible. They cannot unwind the balance sheet. It's mathematically impossible. And they've convinced the marketplace time and time again that they would raise rates. They tried it in 2016, they failed. They've had so much heat now for being wrong, and the Fed's been wrong for 20 years. But they've had so much heat that they're now trying to improve their image by talking tough. And they're trying to talk inflation down by saying, we're going to keep raising rates to 4.5%, blah, blah. They'll never get there. At 4%, the U.S. government debt is $30 trillion. That would be $1.2 trillion in interest costs. The math doesn't make any sense. You got $300 trillion worth of debt around the world, which has doubled in 10 years. How are you going to implode the entire system if you raise interest rates? So I think they're going to find an excuse. And I think the excuse is being given to them. They're exporting their inflation around the world. Countries are screaming. They're looking for IMF bailouts. Something's going to break. In America alone, it now takes 50% of the average household income to pay a mortgage. Credit card debt is at its all-time highs. They're going to break. Something's going to break.
If the U.S. loses its reserve currency status, can it still remain the superpower, or will it also eventually?
I think it's going to. It's a long way off. It's not like Rome with the barbarians at the gate. I think it's got 700 military bases around the world. I don't think it's going to go anywhere. I'm afraid that it finds an excuse for military action to protect its its supreme status, and that's the only thing that worries me. It's just passion. Listen, I love food. And I know you do too. So we're Italian by heritage, so we
It's in our
love food.
blood.
And I've been cooking my entire adult life. My friends love to cook. I discovered the idea of olive oil by just visiting this location. It's another house, but for many, many years, and tasting the olive oil that came from this region, it just blew my mind. And so being curious, I rallied a bunch of good friends around me, and we said, let's go in the olive oil business. This is great. And let's not only that, but let's make the best one in the world. And it sounded a little bit bold at the time, but you know what? Our olive oil continuously wins #1 in the world over and over, all the international contests. It is, in my opinion, the best in the world. And I named it after my mother.
Beautiful.
And for her, I'm proud, and I'm sure she was very proud because she knew, she saw it all happen before she passed away. I grew up in Argentina until I was 9 years old. My whole family did, and my father had invested in some businesses down there. He was hoping to, he was a miner. He was a driller and a blaster, worked underground. Not a great life for him. He did that for so many years. So he wanted to get out of that, and so the Argentinian thing. That time, Argentina was in pretty solid shape. It was one of the wealthiest countries in the world in the 60s. And then he saw the change start. He saw the Peronist movement taking shape and that the country was falling apart. And he decided to move us back to Canada. And then he tried to get his money out. He got into some litigation with some of his partners. And so he didn't get his money out in time. By the time he received his payment, maybe 5 years later, it was worth zero. Hyperinflation had taken hold in Argentina, true hyperinflation, and made the currency worth. He lost everything he worked for over hyperinflation, and he didn't have any gold. So,
and you're saying gold would have saved the firm?
Absolutely, because gold, always keeps its value over any paper currency. No, I wrote an article recently. It was titled "How to Fix a Broken American: 4 Easy Steps That Will Never Happen." That was basically my idea of the article, and basically it was a diagnosis without a realistic cure. And I pointed to 4 things that are almost unique to America and not elsewhere in the world. One is money in politics. Since Citizens United, the Supreme Court case, the creation of super PACs, you can buy any politician you want because now you can spend as much money buying politicians. And it's very reminiscent of the late Roman Republic when senators were being bought.
But it would all be disclosed with a digital currency.
Well, no, but it's not about disclosure. They can do it openly. They're just super PACs have raised about $3 billion. You know that in the last election, $14.5 billion was spent on a U.S. election. That is ridiculous. I mean, you can obviously, if you're rich and powerful and you have an interest that you want to protect, whether you're the pharmaceutical industry that spent almost $500 million last year on lobbying, or the defense industry, which spent $120 million, or the oil industry, all of that money, they spent a total of $4 billion on lobbying. They have 12,000 lobbyists in Washington, D.C., and they spent $4 billion last year in lobbying efforts. It buys a lot more than a 3-martini lunch. It just buys your influence to be able to control and protect your interests, which is usually not always in the best interest of the public. So that was number 1, was take money out of politics, but it will never happen.